as you develop in the business, you should narrow your products and services, and even more so, narrow the prospects that you will work with. Conversely, you could have maybe one specific product that you work with, and you work with a number of clients and a broad range of prospects. Some people may have a very narrow product and a very narrow, highly targeted market. That is not necessarily me, and indeed there are few people that are this specialized, but the important point here is that you should become more focused in what type of products you work with, and more importantly, what type of prospects you work with. It'll make your life simpler, and I promise you, you'll become more successful because you will become a known expert in that marketplace. Invest in your business through support staff and other activities. This is another very important way that MDRT members become top of the table members. That is by hiring support staff. And hiring support staff is an investment. It's not an expense. You will discover that it is one of the best investments that you can make. Hiring and handling a staff remains, in my opinion, the single most important tool in building one business. This is particularly true in the dynamic times in which we live, and is true for the first-year MDRT member, as well as the long-time member running a 30-person operation. For the relatively new MDRT member, the first big step might be to simply hire a part-time assistant. On the other end of the career spectrum, the veteran TOT member may take their next business step by hiring a chief operating officer. Of course, there are varying degrees between those two ends of that spectrum. The fundamental business principle which applies to every MDRT member is that we must constantly be willing to invest in our business by hiring the human resources to which we can delegate what needs to be done. That is what needs to happen. As to how to make it happen and how to best work with your staff, I offer the following set of guidelines about hiring and managing staff. First of all, make sure you test your candidates and employees. The use of some type of personality or work habits testing system is fundamental to any hire you make. There are, of course, many of them out there that are available. This identification of personalities and how they fit together with both you and the rest of your staff can serve you well on a daily basis. Perhaps obviously, but it's important to define job descriptions. Defining specific jobs can be difficult, especially for those of us who like to live in the flexible anything-goes world in which many MDRT members reside. For most people that we will hire and the ones that will be most valuable to us, it is essential. Third point is to delegate as much as possible in writing. What a pleasure it would be to have someone on your staff that you can simply delegate something to with the instructions, handle this, and they take care of it in exactly the manner that you wish. You are very fortunate and among the few if you have such an assistant. I find that a great formula for frustration is to expect this from employees we may never receive it from, unless they worked with us for several years. To mitigate that frustration, we practice a policy in my office of put it in writing. Put it in writing. This eliminates the dreaded feedback when something isn't handled and then you hear, "Don't you remember I told you?" Put it in writing. Hold regular staff meetings, regular weekly staff meetings to review your schedule, big picture, and other things, and sometimes on a daily basis to review daily goals and deadlines. If you are too busy to have a regular staff meeting, you are saying you are too busy to be organized. With many of our employees working remotely, we personally instituted a morning huddle. The entire staff, whoever is working that day, meets on a daily Zoom call every morning at 9:30. This has been one of the best things we've ever done in running our office. So these habits of hiring, training, and managing your staff should be helpful to any MDRT member, regardless of the size of the business you are running. My next point is know yourself, your staff, and your clients. I've just spoken to how important it is to assess your staff as a way of knowing them. Additionally, it's important to know yourself and your clients. Knowing yourself is a vast subject indeed, but my admonition to you is to have a process, to be aware of who you are and how you work. Know your internal body clock. Are you a morning person? An afternoon person? When is your best creative time? When should you ideally meet with clients? It's very important also to use a coach in your business. They can give you perspective on some of those things that you cannot. You know, the world's greatest athletes never stop using coaches. A good business coach will not only help you succeed, but will also help you keep personal balance in life. Now, coaching can take several forms, of course, a manager, a mentor, or perhaps even a spouse. But the important aspects of it are typically it is someone that does not work directly with you. An outside perspective is usually important. It may be someone that understands business, but not necessarily the details of your business. You should have a regularly scheduled review with them. Typically, quarterly is the best frequency to meet with a coach. And there has to be some accountability to them. They must challenge you to make it effective. As I spoke to, this has to be more than a lunch discussion. There must be detailed accountability. And one of the best ways to facilitate accountability may be through a study group. The history of success with study groups within MDRT is long and significant. As to knowing your clients, the most effective summation I ever heard on this was by Bill Bacharach. Bill stated that most prospects are by nature in one of the following categories: do-it-yourselfers, collaborators, or delegators. Personally, I avoid do-it-yourselfers and only very carefully work with collaborators. Delegators are who I am looking for. People that consider me a professional and delegate their insurance and financial needs to me. The key is to have a way, ideally a system, but perhaps your intuition to determine this sooner rather than later. It will serve you well. My next point is to be goal-oriented, the power of three. One of the most important things to manage while attending meetings such as this is, how do you capture the best concepts that you hear? Let me offer you a tool. This technique has served me very well over the years in building my business. Whenever I come to an event like this, I make a point of writing down the best three concepts that I heard. It may be a practice management concept, a way to prospect, or some new way to present something to a client. I distill everything from the day in just three things. And then here comes the important part. I write down what I can do next week to make this happen. For you to achieve MDRT, you must not only decide on a big important goal, but you must decide and commit to take the first step. If you ask me to tell you about the single most helpful philosophy for an entrepreneur to use in managing their business, I would tell you about what I call my 3 M's. I think that we can best manage our business by the following 3 habits: measure weekly, monitor monthly, and manage quarterly. I'll elaborate. What this means is that on a weekly basis, we work on very specific tasks on a relatively short list to achieve our goals. These production activities are being measured, but I, as the producer, am primarily focused on my activities and not necessarily on production. There is an important distinction. Many of us learned early in the business the phrase, see the people and the business will follow. On a weekly basis, I only focus on seeing the people and the other activities that create new business. Then what we monitor monthly is the production. We look back only on a monthly basis to what we achieved, and we put some perspective on where we are year to date and, of course, against our goals. Now comes the really important part. Only on a quarterly basis do we consider managing anything. That is, once a quarter is done, we sit down and pay attention not so much to what we have accomplished, but rather how we have accomplished it. Only then do we consider changing what we are doing in any significant way. The most important thing that I can do on a quarterly basis is to sit back and take a fresh perspective on my business. We also, of course, do the obvious things such as assess revenue and adjust any prospecting or marketing techniques to achieve what we need to achieve for that year. But the important concept here is to be very self-analytical. And of course, as I noted before, ideally with a coach. Question what you are doing, but only question it 4 times a year. Do not question it on a daily, weekly, or even monthly basis while you are doing it. If it was well thought out in the beginning, it makes sense to implement for at least 1 full quarter. My next point is to remain or become a contributor to our industry, organizations, and your community. A common trait of MDRT members, as many of you are, is to be givers. Be a giver. Give back to both your industry and your community. It is the best way to really grow, and I promise you, you will get back more than you give. I promise you. I've received so much from this business, so I make it a point to give back. You will get back more than you can ever give. Become and remain a student of our profession. If you like MDRT days like this one, I have great news for you. You have a career full of them to look forward to. It's how we learn and develop in this business. It is not a luxury to continue to grow in your profession. It is a necessity. Plus, here's the good news. As you grow in your profession, the more you can choose what you want to learn about. Eventually, you will become more of a specialist. That will happen in due time for you younger members. However, there is no end to your education in this profession. You wouldn't want it any other way. My last point is a very important one. Have a passion for our profession. I sometimes have to struggle with the action words to use on this principle. For some of you, it may be develop a passion. For others that have been in the business a while, it is to maintain it. If you are in this industry long enough, you will have a passion for our profession. For me, there have been 2 components that fuel my passion. One is my clients, and the other is my involvement in MDRT. I was inspired to become a member of MDRT at an event similar to this one, and I received personal enrichment from attending the MDRT annual meeting every year. It helps me maintain my passion for the business. Speaking for myself, I'm guilty sometimes of making what we do for a living too complicated, and I sometimes lose sight of our basic function in society. To help me regain that sight, we need only look to John Todd. John qualified for the $1 Million Roundtable for over 60 consecutive years. John summed up our profession in something he wrote called Why I Do What I Do. I'd like to share it with you. We have never experienced any shortage of materials. There's no labor problem that I cannot cure myself. I'd love to create by the stroke of a pen something that was not there yesterday and is here today. I'd like people to trust me. I'd like to have people tell me about themselves. I like the kind of people with whom I am associated. They would be leaders anywhere. I like to pick the people with whom I want to do business. I like knowing that no one has to die or retire in order for me to make progress. I like knowing my boss won't be mad if I earn more money than he or she does. I like working in a business where the sky is the limit. I like knowing that if I make $1, my clients make many more. I like the security which comes from my skill in selling, which no one can take from me, and my renewal account. I get a thrill out of influencing people's minds to sound conclusions for their own benefit. And finally, John said, I like my independence. John went on to speak about the necessity of a professional life underwriter. Just as a doctor is needed to diagnose a disease and prescribe medication, the knowledge of what medicines are available is not enough for people to diagnose and prescribe themselves. It is fascinating that John made these remarks at the 1948 Roundtable meeting. Times have not changed. I've tried to share some things with you today that will be helpful in both managing yourselves and your practices. If you like what I've said today, I want to remind you that everything I've shared, I have learned as a direct result of my MDRT membership and involvement. For nearly 100 years, MDRT's mission has not changed, and we will continue to be the premier association of financial professionals and deliver value to our members in Indonesia and around the world. How exciting it is what is happening here in your country, what you are doing with the products and services helping so many people, and how wonderful it is that we can come together across continents, oceans, and cultures under the common bond of not just our business, but for many of us, our MDRT membership. I wish you all success, good health, and happiness.